Hi guys, so today we're going to start looking at this string quartet, the first movement, Winter Palace. I know that the recording you guys listened to yesterday, which hopefully you did listen to it. If you didn't, please go back and do that before we start and make sure your music is printed out. But anyway, the recording that I sent you yesterday isn't complete. It just gives you a little snippet of the first part. This is kind of an obscure piece. Steffi picked it, but from what I have seen from the score study and listening to the little bit that I was able to, I really love it. And it's obscure, but that also means it's unique. So I think we're going to have a lot of fun working on this. So today what we're going to do is we're going to look at the first little section, the first 16 measures, and there's going to be timestamps in the description box below so that you can just jump directly to the instructions for your part. You should have also gotten Violin's an email yesterday telling you whether you're a first or a second and an outside or an inside player. There's a lot of what's intended to be double stops since it's a quartet, but what we're going to be playing as divisi sections. So all that being said, go ahead and click on the timestamp for your instrument and part, and let's get going. Okay, so we're going to start off by looking at the first violin part. Before we get into it, get your pencil. We're going to mark just a couple of little things. The bowings are already marked in your parts. Steffi did all the bowings for this piece, but there are no fingerings that I can see. I'm just going to make a couple of suggestions. Unfortunately, since we're not in real rehearsals, we can't try things out and make sure that they're going to work within the section. So I'm just going to give some very basic suggestions when I was playing through it, what I think will work best. Starting in first measure, I think we should do this in first position. So mark that first D as open, as well as the last D in that first measure. In the second measure, I shifted to a second finger in third position on the second note and stayed in third position until the last note of that measure, shifting back down on the F, and then going back into third for the last measure of the line, shifting back down on the F in measure 4. Moving forward, same exact thing in measure 7, shifting up on the A, and then in measure 8, you're going to actually shift down on the C sharp. As I said earlier, we're not going to be doing the double stops as printed. So if you're an inside player, you're going to be playing the B flat. Ignore the printed fingerings there. You're going to be playing the B flat in first position or the D in first position, and I'll show you that in a second when I play it. The only other things to mark would be in measure 11, go ahead and play that second A, so the fourth note of measure 11 as an open, but then the other A's in the measure as a fourth finger. Shift up to the D, that printed for first finger D on the last note of measure 11 is good. Stay up in third position until the F natural in measure 13, and that's the last thing I have. So I'm just going to hold this up so you can see what it looks like to make sure you've got everything written. Let's talk through some of these rhythms. It's less so rhythms and more just the time changes that are involved with this section. We're going back and forth between 6/4, 4/4, and 5/4. The main thing to remember is the beat does not change. The value of the beat does not change. The only thing that matters, or that changes rather, is the number of beats within the measure. Okay, so the quarter note is stable the entire time. It does give us a metronome marking of 80. So as long as you set your metronome at 80 and know that that stands for a quarter note, you should be good to go. For instance, in the first two measures, you're in 6/4, so you would be counting 1 and 2 and 3, 4 and 5, 6. 1 and 2 and 3, 4 and 5, 6, and on like that. It's more complicated. It looks more complicated than it is. Other things I wanted to point out is just that there are a lot of expressive and dynamic markings that I want you to pay attention to. The actual notes and rhythms in this first part is not too difficult, so you can certainly do that. As I said earlier, we're not doing any of these divisis, so just for instance, looking at measure 8, if you are on the outside, it's going to sound like this. If you're on the inside, it'll sound like this. Okay, and make sure you get that big reach between the high 2 C sharp and the low 1 B flat. Okay, other than that, it's pretty straightforward. I'm going to go ahead and turn on a metronome to 80 in my ear, so if you want to play along with me, you certainly can. And here we go. Okay. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And one thing I neglected to mention when I was talking about the fingerings is on that last little measure, measure 16, same exact thing. So you're going to go up on the A into third position. Okay, so happy practicing, and I will see you tomorrow for the next part. Bye. Okay, let's take a look at the second violin part now of the string quartet. The first thing I want to do before anything else is write in some fingerings. Now, unfortunately, we're not in normal rehearsals where we can kind of try things out and make sure that we like how they sound. So this is me just going off of, my best guess of what's going to work best for everybody. So go ahead and take a pencil. The bowings are already written in. Steffi did the bowings for this piece, so thank you, Steffi. In measure 6, let's go ahead and do that entire measure in third position, and then shift back down in measure 7 on the first note, that open D. In measure 8, go ahead and mark that B flat, the second note of the measure, not because it's an accidental, but just to emphasize the fact that you're coming from a high 2 C sharp, and you might forget that that's a step and a half down to B flat. The last note in measure 8, if you're on the outside, will be an A, and I want you to play that with a 4th finger. Moving forward in measure 10, make sure you play all of the Ds in this measure with a 4th finger. And then in measure 11, the first note D is going to be an open D. The only other thing I want you to write is, I would really like it if you would either circle the 6-4 in measure 15, or what I've done is actually just write 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 to remind myself that when I'm counting that measure, it's actually 6 beats of rest. Speaking of 6-4, you've probably noticed all the time changes in this section. It looks more complicated than it actually is. The bottom number does not change. It's always either 6-4, 4-4, or 5-4. So that quarter note is going to stay consistent. And luckily, they've actually given us a metronome marking. Quarter note equals 80. So if you set your metronome at 80 and just let it run and make sure that your quarter notes match up with that beat, that will not change. The only thing that changes is the number of beats in a measure. I just want to point out that since this is actually a quartet piece, it's meant to be played, the second violin would only be one player, it's implied that the places where there's a double stop, that it would be played as a double stop because there's only one player. However, since we're doing it as an orchestra, we're going to go ahead and do that divisi. So check to make sure that you understand whether you're an outside or inside based on that email I sent you. And let's take a look at some of these more complicated measures before we play the whole thing. So for instance, let's look at measure 10. I'm going to play the outside part first. So if you're on the outside, you're going to be playing the top notes. Notice that the last beat is a D eighth note tied to a D eighth note. So you're just going to be playing a quarter note there, okay? Here we go. So this is measure 10, and it's in 6-4, so I'm going to count to 6 before I start. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And that went into measure 11. Okay, now I'm going to play it if I was the inside player. So the last two notes will be an A and a G. 4, 5, 6. In the next measure, you do have a C sharp and E, quote unquote double stop, but you're going to play that divisi and also the F and the A in the end of that measure. Same thing in measure 12. Let's look at measure 13. On the outside, you're playing E, D, D. If you're on the inside, you're playing C, B natural, C, B flat, C. So this is what the outside people are going to be playing. 3, 4. And that's the first note of the next measure. I'm going to do that again. 3, 4. So it's 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Now I'm going to play the inside people, your part, bottom notes, 3, 4. Again, and. So it's 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1. Okay? Other than that, it's pretty straightforward. So I'm going to go ahead and turn the metronome on in my ear to 80. And if you want to play along with me, go for it. All right, here we go. Starting at the beginning, we start out with a measure of rest, and this is in 6/4. So here we go. Ready, and rest. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Rest. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay. I did make a bowing mistake there in measure 13. Make sure you do the bowing that is written there with the down up on the first beat. My apologies. Okay, I'm going to play it again, but I'm going to play what the inside people would be playing. So I'm going to play the bottom notes where there's a divisi. Ready, go, and rest. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Rest. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, there you have it. So that is the inside and outside of the second violin part, measures 1 through 16. Happy practicing, and I will see you back here tomorrow for the next section. All right, hi violas. So we're going to talk about the first 16 measures of the first movement of the string quartet, Winter Palace. This part is pretty straightforward. I just want to point out a couple of things. Make sure that you're not playing any half note, especially Ds or tied notes or even quarter notes if you can avoid it with an open string. Whether that's a fourth finger or shifting into a different position is up to you. The bowings are already written in here, so make sure you follow those. Steffi did all the bowings for this piece. Where you see double stops, as of right now, I think we're going to treat these as a divisi. There may be other parts of the piece where we do something different, like some of these aggressive double stops that we are going to see in the next section. But for now, since this is a little bit more of a lyrical, delicate part, I think we're going to go ahead and do it divisi inside outside. So wherever you sat for festival, outside or inside, go ahead and play that part. That's pretty much everything that I wanted to point out. Obviously, you've probably noticed all the time signature changes, 6/4 to 4/4 to 5/4, and it pretty much cycles through that pattern. The thing to keep in mind is that the beat does not change, and they've given us a metronome marking of 80, quarter note equals 80. So as long as you set your metronome to 80 and you make sure your quarter notes match up with that, you'll be just fine. The only thing that changes is the number of quarter notes within the measure. And last but not least, they do give us a lot of expressive and dynamic markings through here. So especially since this part is fairly easy to do from a notes and rhythms standpoint, make sure that you're really paying attention to the dynamic and expressive markings that we have. Okay, so I'm going to play this twice through, once for whoever's playing the top parts and once for whoever's playing the bottom parts. I'm going to do my best. I'm going to set the metronome in my ear at 80, so if you want to play along, we'll be going exactly the tempo that's recommended. The viola part actually starts out with 4 measures of rest, but do be aware the first 2 measures are 6/4 and the second 2 measures are 4/4, so we're going to count through that. Here we go. 1, 2, here's the beginning, rest, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 2, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Measure 3, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Here are the cues for violin 1, 3, 4, 5. Okay, now I'm going to play what the inside players will be playing. I'm going to skip the rest this time and just jump in right at measure 6. Here we go. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. All right, there you have it. I have got to get a viola shoulder rest or I'm going to be very uncomfortable for the next month. Anyway, that was the first 16 measures. Happy practicing, and I will see you tomorrow for the next chunk. Last but absolutely not least, we're going to take a look at the cello / bass part of this first movement of the string quartet Winter Palace. Now, basses. This is a string quartet, so this part is written for cellos. There are going to be some parts that you're going to have to adjust to fit your needs. So let's talk about that first. That last note of the first line, the last note of measure 7, the low D, just go ahead and take it up the octave. Okay, so play all the way up to that point, what's written, last note, kick it up the octave. I'm talking about that one right there. Then the next chunk, and we're only looking at the first 16 measures today, so the next chunk will be, I want you to take all of 11, 12, 13, and 14 up the octave. Okay, so this entire section that I've got bracketed here, 11, 12, 13, and 14, take that all up the octave. Even though there are some notes in there that you could theoretically play, I don't want you jumping back and forth. I'd rather just block off those 4 measures. Okay? As far as cello, I'm going to let you make your own fingerings. Just make sure in measure 11, you've got a C sharp accidental. Make sure that that lasts the entire measure there. So you've got, let's see, beat 1, 2, 3, 4 has the accidental, and then there's another C sharp on the next beat, beat 5. Other than that, there's not too much to talk about. Obviously, there's a lot of time changes in this well, entire piece, but this section it goes back and forth between 6/4, 4/4, 5/4, and kind of repeats that pattern. The good news is the quarter note does not change, the beat does not change. So as long as you set your metronome to 80 and just make sure your quarter notes match up with the metronome, you're good to go. The only thing that changes is the number of beats in each measure. Okay, so it's really a phrasing tool and it shouldn't trip you up too much. Okay, I'm going to do my best to play this part. So this is more similar to what the cellos are going to play. I'm playing on a school viola. So bass is obviously the parts that we talked about playing up the octave will be up the octave. So here we go, be kind. I'm going to put a metronome in my ear at 80. So if you want to play along, we will be going the exact correct tempo. Okay, so we start off with 2 measures of rest, and those 2 measures are in 6/4. So let's go ahead and practice counting that. 2, ready, go, and rest. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Measure 2, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, and then it finishes with another 2 measures of rest. So, with that being said, that's the first 16 measures. Happy practicing, and I will see you back here tomorrow for the next chunk.